Director for Lafourche Parish. Thank you so much for coming. We really do appreciate it.
We are so excited, so honored to have the U.S. Poet Laureate Tracy K. Smith coming tonight and doing a reading, as well as a reception for her. We're so honored to have been chosen to be one of the only place in Louisiana, but one of 7 states that she's going to be visiting in her tour. I think it speaks volumes, and it does kind of match up with what she's talking about tonight. Her book is Poems in Rural Communities. And I think that Louisiana, down south here where we're at in Thibodaux, and then of course tomorrow in South Lafourche, we have some rural areas. And it's beautiful, it's historic, we're right on the Bayou Lafourche, and I think it just really plays into what her work is about.
I'm a poet. I am a professor of creative writing at Princeton, currently serving as United States Poet Laureate. I've been reading and writing poetry seriously for most of my life, and I feel like poetry is something that allows me to slow down, pay better attention, and think things through in a way that's dips beneath the surface, which I don't think our everyday lives allow for very often.
What was your reaction when you were named U.S. Poet Laureate?
I was surprised. I don't think that's the kind of thing that a person can expect. And then I was excited to think about what kind of project I might undertake that could bring poetry and the conversation about poems to a wider audience. I've been doing a project called American Conversations, which celebrates poetry in rural communities. I've been visiting small communities where there aren't necessarily a lot of literary festivals or poetry readings, and talking with people about what poems say to them, what they notice and are made to feel as a result. And I wanted to visit as much of America as was possible in 2 years. Louisiana is a beautiful and very distinct region with many cultures that come together, and so it felt important to come here.
Tell us about your visit to Louisiana.
Well, this morning I had a really beautiful small conversation session and visited with members of the Native community there. We talked about poems. We read a number of poems from a small anthology called American Journal that I edited about 1.5 years ago. And we talked about what the poems spoke to in terms of, our individual experience and even some of the collective cultural stories that people had that were awakened by some of the poems that we shared.
I was Poet Laureate from 2007 to 2011. I was absolutely delighted that Tracy K. Smith was coming here. I think it's really important that the community of poets get together from time to time, and it's such an honor for Louisiana to have the United States Poet Laureate to be here with us.
I think it's almost a 1 in 100 year experience for the Poet Laureate of Louisiana, of the United States, to be here in Lafourche Parish and in Thibodaux. Although not unsurprising, we have a very long tradition of poets and creative writing in Lafourche Parish and in Thibodaux. So we've had plenty of Louisiana Poet Laureates, but I don't think we've ever had a U.S. Poet Laureate or a serving U.S. Poet Laureate.
We're from Thibodaux, and we came here because Mackenzie was making a book, cutting out a newspaper, and found out that the Poet Laureate was going to be in town, and she loves poetry. So we have a daddy-daughter date night to come see the Poet Laureate of the United States.
What did you think when you got a chance to meet her?
Good. It was cool.
Do you want to be a poet someday?
Yes.
What do you think of what you've seen so far here, sir?
We like it. Very nice lady. The facility's beautiful. Been here several times. It's always nice whenever somebody's nice to your kids and enjoys having them around.
I thought it was an opportunity. You don't get to hear poets in this town that much, and since the late Maya Angelou, I really hadn't heard a lot of it, and I wanted to come and refresh myself with some good poetry and take advantage of the opportunity.
Excited. I'm very excited for her being here today.
Yesterday we flew in from Tampa, Florida to see Mrs. Smith and to hear her poetry. And the reason I came is because I wanted to surprise my girlfriend. She loves poetry, and we wanted to see the Poet Laureate.
This was a complete surprise for me. I just found out walking in the door that it was a gift from my boyfriend, a Christmas gift. So Absolute surprise. Flew me out to New Orleans and to come see Mrs. Smith speak. I love poetry, so this is a wonderful gift.
Do you teach poetry?
I do, yes. Literature and writing, yes.
Tell us how your students react to poetry when you tell them the story.
Oh, I think they're going to be thrilled for me and really excited about the opportunity. So we'll definitely have to study some of the poetry as well.
Tracy K. Smith is the author of 4 collections of poetry, including Life on Mars, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and was a finalist for the National Book Award in Nonfiction for An Ordinary Light, a memoir. Walt Whitman heard America singing. Tracy, during this year, has heard America talking. Most recently this fall in Alaska, South Dakota, and Maine before ending her tour with us in Louisiana. To continue these American conversations, please welcome the 22nd Poet Laureate of the United States, Tracy K. Smith.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much for coming. I always feel like I feel so lucky on each of these trips because I have the opportunity to visit small communities and be welcomed so warmly by people there who are willing to talk about what poems make them think and see and feel and wonder. So thank you for the welcome and for being here tonight. I hope we can have a conversation. I'll start out by reading a few of my own poems, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about why I think poetry is so vital to our lives right now as 21st century humans. I feel like there are so many things pulling us in so many different directions, and as a result, we move quickly through the very surface of things. Added to that are all of the shortcuts to thought and speech that have become more and more a part of our lives. And my feeling is that those things are pulling us farther from who we are. They're pulling us out of conversation with our inner voice, which I think is so vital to being human. And poetry is something that says, wait, come back, slow down, let's go deeper. And let's do the work of thinking about what we see, feel, fear, love, and need. So I feel like this project has been in part about saying, let's be human together, and let's be vulnerable to our feelings, and let's use poems as a way of enlarging our vocabulary for who we are. So that's what I feel like we're doing together tonight. But I'll share some poems from Wade in the Water, which is my most recent book. It's a book that is thinking about contemporary America and our many problems, questions. I think the problems and questions that seem most active have to do with fear of difference, and racial difference is one of those things that befuddles America. And so in thinking about that, I've turned toward history to see if perhaps there is another angle on this question that we haven't heard fully enough. So I'll share some poems that are set now and some poems that are looking backward. I think trying to be very resourceful about the trail that's been left us by generations before. But I'll start with a simple, grateful poem about nature. I feel like the natural world is one of the great sights of the holy. This is a poem that's set in Texas, hill country, which I visited for the first time a number of years ago. I'll share it because I feel like seeing so much of America on this tour has given me an appetite to talk about the different landscapes, and this is certainly one that I hope I will return to in language. Hill country. He comes down from the hills, from the craggy rock, the shrubs, the scrawny live oaks and dried up junipers, down from the cloud bellies and the bellies of hawks, from the caracaras stalking carcasses, from the clear sun-smacked soundlessness that shrouds him, from the weathered bed of planks outside the cabin where he goes to be alone with his questions. God comes down along the road with his windows unrolled so the twigs and hanging vines can slap and scrape against him in his Jeep, down past the buck caught in the hog trap that kicks and heaves, bloodied, blinded by the whiff of its own death, which God, thank God, staves off. He downshifts, crosses the shallow trickle of river that only just last May scoured the side of the canyon to rock, gets out, walks along the limestone bank, castor beans, cactus, scat of last night's coyotes. Down below the hilltops, he squints out at shadow, tree backing tree. Dark depth the eye glides across, not bothering to decipher what it hides. A pair of dragonflies mate in flight. Tiny flowers throw frantic color at his feet. If he tries, if he holds his mind in place and wills it, he can almost believe in something larger than himself, rearranging the air. He squints at the Jeep glaring in bright sun, stares a while at patterns the tall branches cast onto the undersides of leaves. Then God climbs back into the cab, returning to everywhere. Maybe I'll read you one. Oh, thank you. Thank you. You don't have to do that, but thank you. So I'll read you one more poem that's thinking about nature. I lived in New York City for just about 20 years, and 4 years ago I left the city. I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, which is it's a college town, but it's also got a lot of beautiful nature. I see foxes now as part of my everyday life, and so many birds and trees, and I feel like it's gotten inside of me. Sometimes when I'm struggling to think about what we are doing, I look out my window and I say, what are the trees doing? What can they show me that we somehow don't see? So this is a poem that is, in a roundabout way, thinking about nature as well. But it begins with what is probably just a dream, although that's not what it feels like to me. The angels. Two slung themselves across chairs once in my motel room, grizzled in leather biker gear, emissaries for something I needed to see. I was worn down by an awful panic, a wrenching in the gut, contortions. They sat there at the table while I slept. I could sense them with a deck of playing cards between them. To think of how they smelled, what comes to mind is rum and gasoline. And when they spoke, though I dared not look, I glimpsed how one's teeth were ground down almost to nubs, which makes me hope some might be straight up thugs, young, slim, raw, who bounce and roll with fearsome grace, whose very voices cause faint souls to quake. Quake then, fools, and fall away. What God do you imagine we obey? Think of the toil we must cost them, one scaled perfectly to eternity. And still, they come, telling us through the ages not to fear. Just those two, that once, and never again for me since, though there are there sightings, flashes, hints, a proud tree in vivid sun, branches swaying in strong wind, rain hurling itself at the roof, boulders, mounds of earth mistaken for dead does, lions in crouch, a rust-stained pipe where a house once stood, which I take each time I pass it for an owl. Bright whirl, so dangerous and near. My mother sat whispering with it at the end of her life, while all the rooms of our house filled up with night. Well, I'll read you the title poem and then maybe share one of the history-based poems. This, to me, is a poem that sort of straddles the present and the past. I've been working on an opera libretto for the last few years that has taken me to coastal Georgia and South Carolina, to the Sea Islands, for research. And on the first of those trips, we visited a number of sites with evidence of, this heavy and shameful history of slavery in this country. And I had the weight of that on my mind, on my heart. And on our last night, we attended a ring shout. And I was thinking about all of this history. I had feelings of, on one level, gratitude to descend from a culture that's been so resilient, so full of hope and forgiveness, and such a powerful voice of justice in this country. And on the other hand, a deep sense of pain. And with all of this in my head, I met somebody who was one of the performers. She saw me and she said, "I love you." And she gave me a hug. And that just opened the floodgates for me. I lost it. I felt so seen and so healed in a way by that gesture. And it wasn't at all diminished by the fact that she said, "I love you," to every single person that she met that night. She hugged them, and that's what she does. Her name is Bertha McKnight, and she's just this beautiful human being who I think is giving love. And I wanted to return to that feeling. So this is the poem that helped me to do that. And you'll hear toward the end, I think, a catalog of images from that history break into the poem. I like writing poems that surprise me. And this was one of them, Wade in the Water. One of the women greeted me. "I love you," she said. She didn't know me, but I believed her, and a terrible new ache rolled over in my chest, like in a room where the drapes have been swept back. "I love you. I love you," as she continued down the hall, past other strangers, each feeling pierced suddenly by pillars of heavy light. "I love you" throughout the performance, in every hand clap, every stomp. "I love you" in the rusted iron chains someone was made to drag, until love let them be unclasped and left empty in the center of the ring. "I love you" in the water, where they pretended to wade, singing that old blood-deep song that dragged us to those banks and cast us in. "I love you," the angles of it scraping at each throat, shouldering past the swirling dust motes
in those beams of light, that whatever we now knew we could let ourselves feel, knew to climb. Oh, woods. Oh, dogs. Oh, tree. Oh, gun. Oh, girl, run. Oh, miraculous many gone. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord, is this love the trouble you promised? Thank you. All right, I'm going to read a poem that is built from the Declaration of Independence. It's an erasure poem, which means that I looked at that original document and I began to delete text and see if I could hear another source of information. And this is what I heard. Declaration. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has plundered our, ravaged our, destroyed the lives of our, taking away our, abolishing our most valuable, and altering fundamentally the forms of our. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, taken captive on the high seas to bear. Thanks. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from a sequence, a longer poem sequence that I wrote as a result of an invitation from the National Portrait Gallery about 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War. And I thought, I want to write a poem, but I don't really, the Civil War is not my thing. Like, I don't know what I want to say about that. But I found some great books that gave me access to letters that Black soldiers and their family members wrote to one another and to President Abraham Lincoln during the war. And then also transcripts of depositions that veterans, their widows, and descendants gave after the war. And I like to say that sometimes those statements were given well into the 20th century. All in an attempt to claim the pension that as soldiers, as veterans, they should have been entitled to. But if you think about it, people who were born into slavery did not have birth certificates. They did not have marriage licenses. They were not given documents to attest to the fact that even if they changed their name at emancipation, they were still the same person who had fought or served under this other name. And so many people were denied the justice of the pension. I thought I was just going to read all this information and learn it somehow and then write a poem in my own voice. But the more I read these letters and statements, the more convinced I felt that there was no reason to do anything but just gather these voices as they were together into a kind of a chorus and invite other people to listen to them with me. So that's what I've done. I'm going to read you two sections of a poem called I Will Tell You the Truth About This. I will tell you all about it. Excellent Sir, my son went in the 54th Regiment. Sir, my husband, who is in Company K, 22nd Regiment, U.S. Colored Troops, and now in the Macon Hospital at Portsmouth with a wound in his arm, has not received any pay since last May, and then only $13. Sir, we, the members of Company D of the 55th Massachusetts Volunteers, call the attention of Your Excellency to our case. For instance, look and see that we never was freed yet, run right out of slavery, in to soldiery, and we hadn't nothing at all. And our wives and mother, most all of them is a perishing all about, and we all are perishing ourself. I am willing to be a soldier and serve my time faithful like a man, but I think it is hard to be put off in such doggish manner as that. Will you see that the colored men fighting now are fairly treated? You ought to do this, and do it at once, not let the thing run along. Meet it quickly and manfully. We poor oppressed ones appeal to you and ask fair play. So, please, if you can do any good for us, do it in the name of God. Excuse my boldness, but please, your reply will settle the matter and will be appreciated by a colored man who is willing to sacrifice his son in the cause of freedom and humanity. I have nothing more to say, hoping that you will lend a listening ear to an humble soldier. I will close. Yours, for Christ's sake. I shall have to send this without a stamp, for I ain't money enough to buy a stamp. I am 60-odd years of age. I am 62 years of age next month. I am about 65 years of age. I reckon I am about 67 years old. I am about 68 years of age. I am on the rise of 80 years of age. I am 89 years old. I am 94 years of age. I don't know my exact age. I am the claimant in this case. I have testified before you 2 different times before. I filed my claim, I think, first about 12 years ago. I am now an applicant for a pension because I understand that all soldiers are entitled to a pension. I claim pension under the general law on account of disease of eyes as a result of smallpox contracted in service. The varicose veins came on both my legs soon after the war, and the sores were there when I first put in my claim. I claim pension for rheumatism and got my toe broke, and I was struck in the side with the breech of a gun, breaking my ribs. I was a man stout and healthy, over 27 years of age when I enlisted. When I enlisted, I had a little mustache and some chin whiskers. I was a green boy right off the farm and did just what I was told to do. When I went to enlist, the recruiting officer said to me, "Your name is John Wilson." I said, "No, my name is Robert Harrison," but he put me down as John Wilson. I was known while in service by that name. I cannot read nor write, and I do not know how my name was spelled when I enlisted, nor do I know how it is spelled now. I always signed my name while in the Army by making my mark. I know my name by sound. My mother said after my discharge that the reason the officer put my name down as John Wilson was he could draw my bounty. I am the son of Solomon and Lucinda Sibley. I am the only living child of Dennis Campbell. My father was George Jordan, and my mother was Millie Jordan. My mother told me that John Barnett was my father. My mother was Mary Eliza Jackson, and my father, Reuben Jackson. My name on the roll was Frank Nunn. No, sir, it was not Frank Nern. My full name is Dick Lewis Barnett. I am the applicant for pension on account of having served under the name Lewis Smith, which was the name I wore before the days of slavery were over. My correct name is Hiram Kirkland. Some persons call me Harry, and others call me Henry, but neither is my correct name. Thanks. Thank you. I'll read one last poem of my own, and then I hope we can kind of have a little back and forth with some poems from the anthology. This is a poem that came from a dream. I don't have a lot of poems that came from a dream, but I guess I have the two, this is being the second. And I woke up because I realized if I could write this down, then I'd have a real poem to keep. And initially, because of the content of the poem, I chose to call it The Mowers. But the longer I lived with it, I realized that maybe it was a metaphor for something else. So this poem is now called Political Poem. If those mowers were each to stop at the whim, say, of a greedy thought, and then the one off to the left were to let his arm float up, stirring the air with that wide, slow, underwater gesture, meaning, hello, and you there, aimed at the one more than a mile away to the right. And if he, in his work, were to pause, catching that call by sheer wish, and send back his own slow, one-armed dance, meaning yes and here, as if threaded to a single long nerve, before remembering his tool and shearing another message into the earth, letting who can say how long graze past until another thought or just the need to know might make him stop and look up again at the other, raising his arm as if to say something like, still, and oh, and then to catch the flicker of joy rise up along those other legs and flare into another bright yes that sways a moment in the darkening air. Their work would carry them into the better part of evening, each mowing ahead and doubling back, then looking up to catch sight of his echo, sought and held in that instant of common understanding, the God and speed of it, coming out only after both have turned back to face the sea of yet and slow. If they could, and if what glimmered like a fish were to dart back and forth across that wide, wordless distance, the day, though gone, would never know the ache of being done. If they thought to, or would, or even half wanted, their work, the humming human engines pushed across the grass, and the grass, blade after blade assenting, would take forever. But I love how long it would last. Thank you. That's such a beautiful note to end on, but I would like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Guy LaMolinara, who is here from the National Center for the Book.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming here tonight, and I wanted to thank the Louisiana Center for the Book for co-sponsoring this program, and Jim Davis, who you met at the beginning of the program. He's been directing the center for over 10 years now, and he does a wonderful job of promoting Louisiana's rich literary heritage. So thank you, Jim, for all you do for us. The Center for the Book at the Library of Congress is a division that has this great mission. We promote books, reading, libraries, and literacy nationwide, but the only way we can do that is through these state centers like the one here in Louisiana, which is at the State Library in Baton Rouge. So I'm happy to tell you we're opening a new center for the book next month, and it will be our 52nd affiliate, and that will be in Puerto Rico. And so if you happen to be in Puerto Rico at the end of next month, please come visit the new Puerto Rico Center for the Book, and Tracy will be there to open it for us. So we're really excited about that. So once again, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm sorry this is the last of our American conversations, because I've really enjoyed being on all of them with Tracy, and I've met so many wonderful people I never would have met before, and I've gone to places I never would have seen before. So I hope you really enjoy this book and you keep reading it. And also, if you want to continue the conversation and you use Twitter, you can go use the hashtag American Conversations, and you can see what other people have done along this journey with us. So thank you again.
The poems that I shared tonight come mostly from my newest book, which is called Wade in the Water. It's a book that is thinking about this current moment in America that's characterized by division, I think a lot of fear, but it approaches those questions by way of history, American history of the founding fathers, the history of slavery, and I'm listening to voices from that other period that might be useful to us now. And, you know, this is a region where a lot of that history lives, and it's exciting to have been able to share some of these poems and talk about them here.
What does this say about the state of poetry in Louisiana and across the country?
Well, you know, I think that we have a really vibrant community of poets in Louisiana. They're in a variety of vibrancy. You know, the poetry community in New Orleans is not the same as the poetry community in Patterson or in Lafayette, but we have a wonderful diversity of poetry in Louisiana, spoken word poetry and text poetry, and so, you know, it's really wonderful to be able to celebrate in events like this. You know, not only the poetry of Louisiana, but the vibrant poetry community throughout the United States.
I think it shows that despite everybody being on their phone or on their iPad, that poetry and literature still really, really resonates with people of all ages, from teenagers to college students to middle-aged folks. And I think people still write and read poetry in ways that really aren't all that different from 100 years ago or 50 years ago, or whenever the golden age of poetry supposedly was.
Good people, you know, calm, cool, relaxed, great attitude, you know, somebody you would like.
Libraries they've changed so much, and they are so vital, just as vital today, if not more so today, than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, libraries were just simply repositories for books, and if you needed to check out a book that you couldn't find or didn't want to purchase, that was the place to come, and libraries just aren't that today. Libraries are more community hubs. We have things for all ages to do, children all the way to adults. There's fun activities. We still have those books. We still have a wide variety of materials for people to check out, but we don't just check out books anymore. We also check out DVD movies, all the new releases. Here in Lafourche, we also check out video games. We have handheld devices, for kids and adults to play. We've brought in materials for reluctant readers. We're trying to help schools with their test scores. So I think, one of the great things about Ms. Smith coming here is just that, it brings another added dimension to libraries. We often have author visits and that type of thing, but to have somebody with, her experience and her credentials to come to Thibodaux and into Lafourche Parish, we just couldn't be more thrilled.
How has the internet impacted libraries?
Oh, I think the internet has just really impacted libraries. Louisiana still has too many people that don't have internet at home. And so the best way is to come to the library. It's free internet. And we're seeing more and more. We've had a downturn economy, as many people know. And it took a while for it to hit here in Lafourche Parish. But, you know, when it did, we had a lot of people out of work. And there's so many companies that now require applications for jobs to be filled out online. And when people don't have access to that at home, great place to come is the library.
What would you like people to keep in mind about the importance of literature, reading, and particularly poems?
I think that looking closely at what language can show us about what we see or what we fail to see makes us more alert, attentive, and curious. I think it makes us more eager to listen to other people and to pay attention to what's going on in their lives, and I think that makes us better citizens in general.
Your reaction to the reception that you have received here in Louisiana?
I'm always grateful when people are interested in, talking about poetry with me, listening to my poems, and sharing their thoughts, and so I couldn't be more happy to have been here tonight.
Oh, I just could not be more thrilled. This is just a wonderful experience for all of us here in Lafourche Parish and in Thibodaux, and I am so grateful to the Library of Congress, to the Park Service, as well as Tracy K. Smith for coming.